Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Financial investigators have raided Google's Paris headquarters as part of an inquiry into the internet search firm's tax payments. France's prosecutor confirmed the raid, which was linked to an investigation into aggravated tax fraud and money laundering.
Google says it does comply with French law and it will cooperate fully with the authorities. Sky's Ashish Joshi has all the details.
The investigation is long-running, but the raid came suddenly and without warning. According to witnesses, at least 100 officers, including financial and software experts, stormed into Google's Paris headquarters at dawn. The French prosecutor said later in a statement, "The investigation focuses on whether the company Google Ireland Limited has violated its obligations, including under the corporate income tax and value-added tax." And Google responded with, "We comply with French law and are cooperating fully with the authorities to answer their questions." The French investigation began almost exactly 1 year ago. Google has more than 70 offices across 40 countries. It's accused of generating revenue in these countries and then funneling the profits through its European headquarters in Dublin to offshore accounts. The process is legal. It's known as profit shifting or profit optimization, depending on who you ask.
Well, Ireland's got a 12.5% rate of corporation tax, which is lower than ours and certainly much lower than France's. But the other nice thing about Ireland, if you're Google, is that they have a special rule that allows money to be siphoned off to Bermuda. So in fact, the amount of tax that's paid in Ireland is very, very small, and the amount of tax paid in Bermuda is nil because they don't charge corporation tax.
Here in the UK, it agreed to pay back about £130 million in taxes. The deal was widely criticised for being too lenient, but it did draw the software giant's tax affairs to the attention of other European investigators. French authorities have already said they won't enter into any deals and want the full £1.3 billion they think is owed to them in full.
That is the law. They have to pay their taxes. So if the amount of tax is 1.6 billion, it has got to be paid. There is no way you negotiate with your tax inspector. That's not on. It's just not a French thing. You don't do that. Your tax is decided by the inspectors and you pay what you've got to pay.
The French investigation is being followed closely by tax authorities across Europe. The software giant search engine may now need to look for other ways of generating low tax profit. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
Well, we just heard from Julian Morm in Ashish's report there, a barrister who specialises in international tax. And I spoke to him at length a little earlier and started by asking him what the French authorities were accusing Google of doing.
When the story broke in the UK, the French foreign minister said that he thought that we had in essence done a sweetheart deal with Google and that was not going to happen in France. And what we see today is that he is making good on that promise because they've raided with 100 French tax officials, Google's offices in France. They've accused Google, it would seem, of all sorts of financial crimes. So the allegations don't seem to be allegations of avoidance. They seem to be allegations that look like evasion. So, you know, they're not messing around.
And is this all for show, or is there actually a chance that the French authorities could end up getting some tax money back?
It's a pretty big call to say that the National Revenue Authority of a very serious country like France is sending in 100 investigators for show. You have to think that they have evidence that substantiates their actions, consistent, as I said, with what they were saying at the time of our deal with Google. So, you know, if you're a Google exec sitting in Paris, you're checking the conditions of your passport, and you are getting pretty concerned about all of this.
You're talking about the UK deal because, of course, as you say, back in January, Google agreed to pay back £130 million in back taxes. Looking back and contrasting with what the UK did with France, does it look like the UK authorities' approach was a bit timid?
We can't, of course, know how good the deal that Google did with the UK was for UK taxpayers generally. We can't know that. Certainly, many of your viewers will have wondered about the amount of tax that was paid compared to Google's turnover and Google's profits and Google's activities in the UK. And from my perspective, really these issues ought to be ventilated in a public forum. HMRC ought to have taken Google to court so that we could all see that tax justice was being done and being done properly. That way we wouldn't be having this conversation, and your viewers who pay their taxes wouldn't be sitting at home feeling aggrieved. And if it turned out that the deal that HMRC did was the right deal, then no harm is done. And if it turned out that in fact Google ought to be paying more tax, then we, as citizens, would all be much better off.
Is there a chance now that that deal could be revisited, as with what's happening in France?
Well, the circumstances in which you can revisit a deal are very narrow indeed, so you wouldn't be able to revisit a deal unless there was, in essence, fraud in the way in which that deal was structured, and I think that's extremely unlikely, although you do look at what the French are alleging. But of course the deal only covers Google's tax liabilities up until June 2015. Going forward, it's certainly open to HMRC to revisit the terms of the deal that they've done in the past and strike a much more aggressive chord going forward. So it may be that the effect of this hearing in France will increase Google's UK tax liability.
Is there an argument that if authorities in countries like France end up looking heavy-handed, potentially anti-business like Google, that other corporations in this globalised world could decide to come to countries like the UK as a result?
Well, businesses go where businesses think they can make money, and of course one of the things that affects their assessment of whether they can make money is whether the business climate in a country is stable and predictable, whether the tax authorities can be relied upon to act in a sensible and logical way. So of course, if you're a government trying to attract investment, you have regards to all of those factors. But it does not seem to me to extend to treating businesses less favourably than the law obliges you to treat them when it comes to their tax liabilities.
And do you think that's what the UK government has done?
Well, sadly we can't know. One of the real oddities, the really unfortunate things about the state of UK tax law is that Google can tell us what they like about their tax liability, and HMRC cannot contradict that information. So we have no way of knowing whether what Google tells us about its tax liability HMRC agrees with or doesn't agree with. It's a criminal offence for an officer of HMRC to tell us anything at all about what Google is telling us about Google's tax liability.
Interesting stuff. Thank you very much.
Great pleasure.